Millionaire buys flowers from little girls, then realizes they're his. It was a chilly Thursday morning on Fifth Avenue. The city had already come alive with its usual chaos, horns honking, heels clicking on concrete, voices blending into a hum of ambition. Outside a small corner bakery where the scent of fresh cinnamon rolls drifted into the street stood three little girls. They weren't here to eat. They weren't window shopping. They were holding tiny handmade bouquets of mismatched, half-wilted flowers. The oldest, Emily, around 10 years old, wore a patched-up jacket that barely fit and shoes clearly passed down more than once. She clutched a bunch of daisies wrapped in wrinkled newspaper. Beside her was Sophie, about 7, shyly offering tulips tied with a rubber band, her cheeks flushed from the cold. And then there was Grace, no older than 4, holding a tiny bundle of crushed wildflowers, tied together with an old shoelace. Her smile, wide and innocent, was the brightest thing on the street that morning. Passers-by barely noticed. Some shook their heads, others muttered, "No cash," without stopping. A few stared, then looked away in discomfort. But the girls stood tall, bravely hopeful. Emily stepped forward when she saw a tall man exiting a sleek black SUV. His steps were sharp, precise. He wore a tailored charcoal suit, an expensive wool coat, and dark-framed glasses. His face looked like it hadn't smiled in years. "Buy some flowers, sir. We're just hungry," she said, voice soft but steady. The man paused. His name was Daniel Carter, tech billionaire, founder and CEO of Carter Innovations, and known across boardrooms as a genius with ice in his veins. Today, he was headed to a critical investor meeting. A normal man would have ignored the girls, but something about them caught him. He looked down, taking in their dirt-smudged faces, mismatched shoes, and bright plates, eating eyes. His gaze lingered on Grace, the youngest. Her chipped tooth, her lopsided pigtails, her radiant, trusting smile. It hit him like a ghost from the past. His chest tightened. For a moment, he felt something unexplainable. Wordlessly, he reached into his wallet and handed Emily a $100 bill. "I'll take them all," he said. The girls froze in disbelief. Sophie's eyes widened, and she whispered, "Thank you," like she couldn't believe it. Grace bounced on her toes and laughed, spinning once in the cold air. Daniel accepted the flowers, though he barely looked at them. In his hands were broken stems, torn petals, and newspaper wrappers, but he held them gently. He turned away and walked back toward his car, his phone buzzing in his pocket, his driver waiting. But something was different. His mind wasn't on the meeting. He didn't feel like a man about to close a deal. He felt like someone who had just opened a door he didn't know existed. He looked down at the flowers in his hand, useless, fading, but for some reason he couldn't throw them away. He sat in the back seat, carefully placing the bouquets beside him as if they mattered. His phone rang again. He didn't answer. He kept seeing that little girl's smile, warm, genuine, familiar, in a way he couldn't place. The driver asked if he should head to the office. Daniel nodded silently, still staring at the ribbon wrapped around one of the bouquets. His fingers brushed against it absent-mindedly. For years, Daniel Carter had lived without pause, conferences, deadlines, mergers, and money. But today, 3 little girls had made time stop. He didn't know why their faces stayed with him. He didn't know why his chest felt tight. All he knew was that, for the first time in a long time, something inside him had stirred. Not logic, not business, something else, something real. Daniel Carter sat alone in his penthouse office as the city lights flickered far below, casting silver reflections against the towering glass windows. The bouquets lay beside him on the desk, still wrapped in newspaper and silence. He hadn't touched them since the moment he'd stepped inside, but something about their presence made it hard to focus. Emails blinked unanswered on his screen, and untouched documents cluttered his desktop. He loosened his tie, restless. Something gnawed at him from the edge of his thoughts. He reached for the smallest bouquet, the one Grace had given him, and noticed a frayed pink ribbon loosely knotted around the stems. As he untied it, something small slipped out and clinked against the polished oak table. It was a charm, a tiny silver heart-shaped locket, dulled with age, with scratches around its edges like it had been clutched too many times by two small hands. Curiosity, mixed with a strange sense of dread, made his fingers work the fragile clasp open. Inside, behind a scratched glass window, was a photo. His breath caught. He hadn't seen that face in over a decade, yet it felt as if no time had passed. Rachel Monroe, her eyes soft and kind, her smile warm and unguarded, her hair tucked behind one ear the same way she always used to when they were together, a moment frozen inside a locket. He leaned back in his chair, stunned. Memories surged forward. Quiet mornings in her tiny apartment, her laughter over burnt pancakes, the way she used to sketch flowers on napkins during their late-night coffee runs. She had loved flowers, always said they made the world feel less cold. Rachel, the only woman he had ever loved with his whole heart, the one he left behind. His father had called her a distraction, a small-town girl with no ambition, no pedigree, no place in the Carter legacy. Daniel had believed him back then. He'd told himself it was for the best, that she'd be fine, that he'd forget. But looking at her face now, nestled in that locket, all of those excuses turned to ash. He swallowed hard, his fingers trembling around the chain. How had this ended up in a flower bouquet sold by a child? His heart pounded louder than the traffic below. The girls, the three of them, Emily with her quiet strength, Sophie's soft voice, Grace's unforgettable smile. Rachel would have been about 36 now, he realized, old enough to have daughters that age. Daughters. The word hit him like a storm. Could it be? Could those children, dirty-faced, barefoot, brave, be hers? Be his? His chest tightened with a weight that made it hard to breathe. He got up and paced, gripping the locket like it might vanish if he let go. All the years, all the time wasted chasing numbers and towers and profit margins. What had it cost him? Had he turned his back not just on love, but on a family? He remembered how Rachel once told him she wanted a house with a garden. "I want my kids to pick flowers every morning," she'd said, laughing. "Real ones, not the kind that grow on spreadsheets." He hadn't laughed with her. He'd been checking his watch, waiting for a call. Now he wished he could go back to that exact moment and never leave. He sat down again, running his thumb over the locket's surface, trying to stay grounded, trying to think logically. But logic felt useless now. His mind raced through the years she had been gone. Where had she lived? Was she married? Did she ever try to reach him? Why hadn't she told him? Or maybe she had, and he'd been too busy to notice. The guilt rolled in like waves. He looked again at Rachel's picture, now streaked with moisture from the tear he hadn't realized had fallen. The locket wasn't just a memory, it was a clue, a quiet message from the past, accidentally handed to him by fate or maybe by something bigger. A sign. Could those girls truly be his daughters? Could life really come back in such an unexpected way? He didn't have answers yet. Only a locket. And three little faces he couldn't forget. The next morning, Daniel sat in the back of his car with the locket still clutched in his hand, his coffee untouched, his schedule cancelled. The GPS on his phone blinked with a red pin, an address that didn't appear in any of his polished city directories. It was a neighborhood he had driven past countless times without ever seeing, but now it was the only place that mattered. As the car rolled down cracked streets and past rusting fences, he saw the city from a different angle. Forgotten blocks, boarded windows, children riding bikes with one pedal missing. His chest tightened with every block. When the car finally pulled over, he stepped out onto the curb in front of a faded brick building with peeling white paint. There was no sign, no security, no elegance, just a dented mailbox and a crooked screen door. He stood there, unsure, suddenly feeling smaller than he ever had in his glass tower. A woman appeared on the porch, older, with silver-streaked hair pulled back in a bun. She wore a loose cardigan and worn sneakers, and her eyes were tired but kind. "You looking for someone?" she asked cautiously. "My name is Daniel Carter," he replied quietly. "I think 3 little girls might have something of mine. Or maybe I have something of theirs." Her eyes didn't flinch. She nodded slowly, as if she'd been expecting this moment to come someday. "You'd better come inside." The air inside smelled of oatmeal, cleaning spray, and faint lavender. The place was neat but worn, blankets patched together, toys in plastic bins, hand-painted signs with rules on the walls. Children's laughter echoed from a back room, followed by a sharp hush. Linda motioned for him to sit. She reached into a drawer and pulled out a folded envelope. Inside were documents, Rachel's medical papers, a hand-scribbled letter, and birth certificates. He read them in silence, his jaw clenched. No father's nothing. Me was listed. Just Rachel's signature. And 3 identical birthdays. His throat closed. "She never told them who you were," Linda said, watching him gently. "She said if you ever showed up, she hoped you were still a good man. Just busy. Not cruel." Daniel nodded slowly, the weight of those words sinking in. The door creaked open behind him, and he turned. 3 familiar little figures stood there, Emily in front, Sophie beside her, Grace half hiding behind the hem of Linda's coat. They didn't run to him. They didn't smile. Their eyes were wide, uncertain. Emily took a step forward but stayed silent. Daniel stood slowly, careful not to move too fast. "I saw you yesterday," he said softly. "You gave me something more than flowers." He reached into his coat and held up the locket, letting it dangle gently. Grace blinked, recognizing it. Sophie whispered something into Emily's ear. Linda crouched beside them and said quietly, "He knew your mama a long time ago." The girls looked between Linda and the man in the suit. His presence didn't match their world. He was tall, clean, polished, everything opposite of what they knew. But his voice wasn't loud. It didn't scare them. Daniel lowered himself to one knee. "I didn't know," he said, voice cracking. "I swear, if I had, I would have come sooner." Emily held Sophie's hand a little tighter. Grace peeked out, her eyes softening, curious. "I don't expect you to believe me," Daniel continued, "but I want to know you. I want to help. Not because I feel guilty, but because I think I'm supposed to. Because I think I'm your father." The room went silent. A clock ticked in the background. The sound of a distant bus rumbled through the cracked windows. Grace took a slow step forward. "You knew Mommy?" she asked in a small voice. Daniel smiled gently, eyes misted. "I did, and I miss her too." Linda exhaled deeply, as if she'd been holding her breath the whole time. The girls didn't say much more that day, but they didn't run away. They sat with him, they let him read to them, and for the first time in years Daniel Carter felt more than regret. He felt a beginning. The days that followed were a quiet unfolding of something fragile but full of hope. Daniel didn't try to take control. He simply showed up, again and again. Morning visits turned into longer afternoons, and those stretched into evenings filled with board games, simple dinners, and gentle conversations. Trust wasn't immediate, but it grew slowly, like wildflowers breaking through pavement. Linda helped bridge the gap, staying nearby for support, guiding Daniel when he stumbled through the unfamiliar language of bedtime routines and comforting small fears. Eventually, one afternoon, the girls asked if they could visit his house, but Daniel didn't take them to the penthouse. Instead, he drove them to a modest cottage on the edge of the city, freshly painted with sky-blue shutters and a tree swing that swayed gently in the wind. He had bought it weeks ago, quietly, when he first began to hope they might one day live with him. The house was quiet, warm, and ready, 3 small bedrooms with colorful quilts, a kitchen filled with snacks they loved, and shelves already stacked with storybooks and drawing supplies. The girls explored each room with cautious excitement, as though waiting for the moment they might be asked to leave. But Daniel knelt down, arms open, and simply said, "Welcome home." That night, He burned the pancakes. Grace got syrup in her hair, and Sophie spilled juice on the floor. But they laughed, really laughed, and it echoed through the walls like music. As days became weeks, new routines formed. Emily took the lead in the mornings, brushing her sister's hair and helping pack their school bags. Daniel made it a point to walk them to the corner each morning, Eve, and if it meant missing a call. In the afternoons, he waited at the kitchen table with snacks and questions about their day. The girls began to open up more. Emily showed him her drawings, Sophie taught him how to play a clapping game, and Grace insisted he learn how to braid a doll's hair, which he never quite mastered. He wasn't perfect. He mixed up their teachers' names, burned more than one dinner, and got tangled in ballet ribbons, but he was there, present and willing. At night, they huddled together on the couch, Grace tucked under his arm, Sophie leaning on his shoulder, and Emily quietly watching from the side before joining in. They watched cartoons, shared popcorn, and laughed without fear. He told them about Rachel, not just her beauty, but her strength, her kindness, her stubbornness when it came to protecting what she loved. He spoke of her dreams, her laugh, her bravery, and he told them the truth about himself, how he had once been too blind to see what mattered, how he let fear and pride lead him away, and how lucky he felt to be given another chance. The girls didn't say much when he shared that. They simply listened. But the next morning, a handmade card lay on the table. "We're glad you're here, Dad." One evening the stars were bright and the air was cool. They lay on a blanket in the yard, heads nestled close, wrapped in old quilts. Sophie looked up at the sky, then turned to him and asked softly, "Are you really our dad?" There was no accusation, only a child's longing to believe. Daniel looked at her, his voice thick with emotion. "I always was," he said. "I just didn't know it yet." Emily rolled closer, resting her head on his arm. Grace pulled his hand into hers and didn't let go. In that quiet moment beneath the stars, the past was forgiven. The hurt began to heal. The family Rachel once dreamed of had finally found each other, not through perfection, but through love, and for the first time in years, Daniel Carter felt truly rich, not in dollars, but in meaning. As the night sky shimmered overhead and the girls drifted off beside him, the camera slowly pulls back, fading into the peaceful stillness of the home. Then, the screen fades to black, and in soft, steady text, a single line appears. He found millions in his account, but only love in 3 little hearts.